So I'm going to share my screen. Maybe not, maybe. We're going to call this meeting to order now. It is 7:02 on December 1st, 2022, and this is a public meeting of the City of Portland Police Accountability Commission Subcommittee on Structural Oversight. If the Spanish language interpreters, Talia and Luisa, could you please give the information on Spanish language interpretation? That would be most helpful. Talia.
I'm sorry, I'm you. Muy buenas noches a todos. Vamos a empezar esta reunión. Son las 7:02 de la noche, el 1 de diciembre del 2022. Esta es una reunión pública de la ciudad de Portland, del Comité de Accountabilidad de la Policía.
Thank you so much, Talia. The city also offers ASL interpretation, which is being provided by Abel and Mary. Please pin their video feed to see their interpretation throughout the meeting. Finally, the closed captioning is turned on in Zoom as another means of assistance, but please note this is an automatic captioning service and it is not always accurate. The city supports access to meetings at the Police Accountability Commission and can provide other language support as well. Please email in advance of future public meetings, either as a response to a public meeting notice or directly to policeaccountability@portlandoregon.gov to ask for other access assistance, including interpretation into other languages. This meeting is a public meeting subject to City of Portland Administrative Code and Oregon state law and is being recorded. For this meeting, the chat function is enabled for commission members to communicate with each other. Members of the public will be able to ask questions using Zoom's Q&A feature. As the commissioners are presenting and or discussing things, if attendees have questions, please feel free to submit them through the Q&A. We hope to use this feature to help guide our conversations during the meeting and future meetings and agenda topics. We'd like to be clear that not all questions will be answered during the meeting, but if answered, both the questions and the answers will be visible to you and will become part of the meeting record. To access this feature, just click on the Q&A icon in the middle of your screen. I'm going to invite the co-chairs. I'm going to stop sharing and invite the co-chairs to speak about the land acknowledgement.
Thank you. The city has asked for a moratorium on land acknowledgements, and the PAC has honored that request. As the city now displays a land acknowledgement in City Hall, we give a land acknowledgement using the same language on display, which is, we acknowledge that the rivers, lakes, streams, and the lands of the lower Willamette River rest upon the occupied territories of the Multnomah, Wasco, Cowlitz, Clackamas, Chinook, Tualatin, Kalapuya, Molalla, and many other tribes. We recognize the many villages, traditions, cultures, and relationships that existed along the river since time immemorial. We recognize these tribes stewarded these lands and rivers since time immemorial for future generations. We recognize and undertake responsibility for the destruction of the river and land, of traditional food sources, sacred places, and multifaceted ways of life. We acknowledge the economic and social values that enabled the harm to the river, including systemic racism, classism, and other systems of oppression that perpetuated harm against Black, Indigenous, and immigrant communities along the river. With this acknowledgement, we commit to honoring and learning from the past in working towards a more equitable and sustainable future for the lower Willamette River. We commit to seeking solutions that acknowledge the inequities of past socioeconomic policies and, the harm done to people and our relationships to these lands and waters. And so now I am going to pass it back to the facilitators.
Thank you so very much. This evening, I would like us to read the community agreements. We have 2 slides worth of community agreements. And this evening, while you're doing your work, I ask you to always confront oppression while you're doing this work this evening as you're crafting the structure. And so I would just pull that one out for this evening. Please read this slide and then I'll move to the next one. Thank you so much. I would love to see jazz hands or thumbs up in acknowledging and leaning into the agreements. Thank you so much. I'm going to now pass the meeting back over to our co-chair, Jay.
Thank you, Dr. Moses. This meeting is a part of the Police Accountability Commission's powers and duties phases of work. It is expected to go into January and will end when all 3 of this phase's outcome documents are approved. This is the first of several phases in which the PAC will directly begin deciding what will go into the recommendations the PAC will send to City Council for a new police accountability system, including the new Oversight Board. This phase focuses on the functions of the new system. Future phases of work will develop the form of the new system, as well as how it relates to the rest of the city government and the transition plan from our current system to the new one, before commission presents all proposed changes to the City Council in 2023 for their consideration and approval. Following today, here are the next few meetings of PAC. This subcommittee meets again on December 15th, and the subcommittee on officer accountability has a meeting on December 5th, a longer work session December 10th, and another meeting December 19th. The subcommittee on access to information meets December 12th with a briefing from the Independent Police Review, and it also meets on December 29th. Finally, the full commission meets next Thursday, December 8th. This slide is the current project plan for the powers and duties phase of the Police Accountability Commission's work. It will be updated as needed throughout this phase of work. This slide is for members of the public to be able to understand how the commission gets from now through the end of the phase, which focuses on identifying areas of agreement among commission members as to the functions of the new system. Today's meeting is part of the gold box with the red border in the bottom left part of the screen. And this slide shows the outcome documents for the powers and duties phase based on the agenda and scope approved by the commission. These documents each correspond to one of the subcommittees. One document will focus on how the new system will access needed information to do its work. The second on how it will handle administrative misconduct allegations against individual officers. And the third on how it will contribute to structural oversight of the police bureau. Today's meeting agenda includes a review of the subcommittee's mandate, followed by discussions about how the subcommittee should structure its work, and then looking at the work the PAC has already done on these issues during the fact-finding phase, which will open up our subcommittee's discussion. This is also an open public comment period during today's agenda. There is also, an open public comment period during today's agenda.
Thank you so much, Co-Chair. I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to invite us in to introduce yourselves, if you don't mind, members of this subcommittee.
Well, I can go first since I
That
was
would
just
be
talking.
And then you can popcorn over to the next person if you like.
Sure. I am Ajay, also known as Jay, and Commissioner Ajay, I should say, and I use she, they pronouns. Glad to be here. And I will pass it to Sophia.
I am Sophia Glenn, and I'm a commissioner. Thank you. Christian?
Hi, how's it going? I'm a commissioner and full commission co-chair, Christian. I'm not actually on this subcommittee, but I'm supporting here today because there are we don't have any subcommittee co-chairs yet for this one, so I'm serving as like a support second subcommittee person, co-chair to full commissioner co-chair Ajay. Thank you. I'm excited to be here as well. Oh, sorry. I will pass it to wait.
Debbie.
Oh, Debbie. Thank you.
Okay, there, I got it. Hi, thank you. I'm Debbie Iona. I'm one of the commissioners and she, her. So I think that's all of us. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Thank you and welcome in, everyone. So first thing we're going to do today is to review what is required to discuss and develop as part of what the commission has to do, which was put into the powers and duties phase of work and assigned to the subcommittee. Later in the agenda, we will discuss other items which fit into the category of structural oversight, which can be discussed by the subcommittee as well. I will now pass it off to staff.
Yes, thank you. There are several portions of the Community Police Oversight Board's definitions or powers, which are defined under City Charter Section 210, which was passed on by the voters in November 2020, that relate to structural oversight. I'm going to actually share screen if I can, please, and highlight a few particular sections. So, here we go. Under section 2-1001, which is the overall definitions, the city charter requires the Community Police Oversight Board to make recommendations regarding police policies, practices, policies, and directives to the Portland Police Bureau, and with a primary focus on community concerns. As part of that, and as part of all of its functions and duties, the new Police Oversight Board needs to be able to exercise independent judgment and to be free of interference from the mayor, city council, auditor, and city departments, which is part of section 2-1006. And finally, under 2-1007, powers of the board, the entirety of section B here relates to this particular area of the new oversight board's work. And I'll read it into the record. The board shall have the authority to make policy and directive recommendations to the Portland Police Bureau and the City Council. The Portland Police Bureau shall consider and accept or reject all policy or directive recommendations made by the board. If the Portland Police Bureau rejects a policy or directive recommendation, then at the request of the board, City Council must consider and vote to accept or reject the policy recommendations received from the board. Council's decision will be binding on the Portland Police Bureau. Next to review are the two council resolutions, 37-527 and 37-548, which set up the commission. Resolution 37527 doesn't have anything relevant to this, as it's more about the empowerment of the commission to act, but does not provide additional responsibilities or powers to the oversight board. However, the other resolution, resolution 37548, has several relevant sections. Two of them that I'll highlight here. The definitions section talks about defining some of those concepts, independent judgment and interference by other bureaus and commissioners. And then under powers of the new oversight system, this third one here, how to propose direct changes to police policies and directives, is one of the tasks of the oversight board that the commission needs to define. So those are the things that are required of the commission within this area of work. The PAC in March put together policy and directive changes as a part of this phase of work, including how the obligation to respond works, which is something that needs to be defined in city code. So under the PAC agenda and scope, under the establishing powers and duties phase, there is how to propose policy changes for PPB. And that's the process of making the policy and training recommendations, as from both the community board and the agency staff, as well as the chief and police commissioner's obligation to respond, and if implemented by either the chief or the council, to follow the oversight board's decisions and recommendations. And that was put into the third area of agreement: policy recommendation, development, delivery, and follow through processes. And then within this phase of work, this task was given to this particular subcommittee, the subcommittee on structural oversight, whose task is to develop the draft areas of agreement on structural oversight and refer it to the full commission for its review, adaptation, and eventual approval. At a minimum, this document has to include the policy development process as well as the obligation to respond. And we'll get into some of the other optional duties later on during the discussions, as there were many items which were found out during the commission's previous phase, the fact-finding phase, that makes sense to include in this document if commission members support the oversight board having the specific power or duty. And finally, the last thing to mention is that the subcommittee has 4 meetings roughly in which to do this work. So that is the review portion. I'll pass it back over to facilitators. Thank you.
Thank you so much, staff. Next on our agenda is a discussion about briefings and who subcommittee members would like to hear from, invite in, and be briefed by. So I'm going to share my screen. Again, everyone will be asked to speak once and to take up to 2 minutes to speak. Raise hands on Zoom to allow the facilitator to call on people in a way that promotes conversation and keeps the conversation moving and allows everyone to speak. And please remember that facilitators can use a weighted stack. And be constructive, look forward, and discuss how to make the commission's work more successful. And so I would like to invite us into this round robin regarding who you would like to hear from and be briefed by during this phase of work. Who would like to start? Oh, Jay, thank you so much.
So I was reading about civil suits against the police in Portland, and there was a number of suits of one officer against the other, including a sexual harassment suit. And I know, at least for the sexual harassment suit, the person is not identified. So I assume that it would be a breach of confidentiality for them to be part of like a public meeting. So but their lawyer has been identified in the press, and I wonder, and this is somebody that has a lot of experience doing civil cases, and it's possible maybe this one lawyer has actually done multiple cases against the police given his civil experience. So I'm wondering if maybe this person named Jason Caffory, who is a local lawyer, I think here in Portland, and I can put like a link in the chat or something. I don't know. And then, yeah, so maybe not just him particularly, but I would be curious if maybe we can do some more research about the different lawsuits and awards, civil awards against fellow officers, and then ask either those officers or their lawyers about the culture that, because I specifically thought of this one lawyer because he said specifically in an OPB article that this one officer's behavior, who was the person in charge, fostered a culture of sexual harassment and oppression. So I would be interested to hear more about that culture. Should I pass it to somebody?
Sure, yes, that would be great. Thank you.
Anybody ready? I don't want to pick someone who's not ready to speak. Debbie, you look like you have something to say.
I don't really have any big ideas about who to talk to. When I sent out that document yesterday with just sort of some things I picked out of our bigger document. And it seems to me that this group does not have a huge job to do, which is good. And I'm sure we could spend tons of time talking about, small elements that are part of this whole thing. But in some ways, I wonder if it would be easier to decide who we might want to talk to and what questions we might have after we sort of take a first try at coming up with how we want the new oversight board to interact on policy issues with the police bureau and within its own agency and within the city. So yeah, and I'm trying to think, the one group I think of that makes policy recommendations right now directly to the police bureau is the PCCP, Portland Committee on Community Engaged Policing. They have submitted policy recommendations, and whether or not, and they probably would have some interesting things to share about the experiences they've had as far as getting responses back and whatever happened to those policies they recommended. So that might be a useful discussion. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Debbie. Who would like to go next? Commissioner Sophia.
Yes, what I'd like to do personally is spend a little more time on the documents that were highlighted by staff in some of those areas to see, what our deliverable is in particular. I think this is going to be a really important part of the commission or the board, the new board, because anytime we see an issue or anyone sees an issue, we have to be able to make a recommendation on how to manage that or change that or rectify the issue. And if I can remember correctly, it was saying, how would we implement that? So I kind of wanted to spend a little time myself personally on figuring out what our real deliverable is and how we might formulate that in a code. As far as experts to bring, I don't have any in particular offhand, but I'd like to do some of my own homework. I apologize for not having done it beforehand, but that's my ideas at this point.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Sophia. Commissioner, yes, co-chair. Yep.
Thank you. Yeah, I also don't have any names specifically off the top of my head, but I know that the other subcommittees have been meeting with people with legal expertise on some of these matters. I don't know if that might be useful in a situation to find out maybe trying to figure out the right way to phrase, like, I don't know if I have the right language to explain. So hopefully I'll just talk and hopefully it makes sense. Hopefully someone can decode what I mean. But people who maybe have legal experience implementing or changing policy currently with PPB or the police in general. Doesn't have to be PPB specifically necessarily. I don't know if there would be certain like labor laws that are around the police union. Like, I don't know if they have any say in how to implement policy or anything like that. I don't know if that might be something we want to take a look at. That's the only thing that really comes to mind for me. I had one other thought, but I lost it now trying to figure out how to say the first one. So I'll say it later if I remember it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, co-chair. Staff.
Yeah, so just wanted to ask two clarifying questions. One to co-chair Jay about essentially the category, more broadly than including but not limited to Jason Kafuri would be essentially lawyers who are representing PPB officers that are in the process of conducting civil lawsuits against other officers. Is that the sort of category is that a good way of describing it?
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking in terms of just settlements, like officers that have been awarded settlements against as a result of behavior, of other officers, if that makes sense. So usually that's civil, I assume, but I might be wrong about that.
Yeah, thanks. That's helpful to kind of narrow it down. And then to Commissioner Debbie, PSEP is administratively housed within the Community Safety Division, so very easy to extend a request to them to brief, and also possibly to former PSEP members who might have experience with the previous rounds of recommendations that have had time to potentially be reviewed and be implemented. And just wanted to mention to your concern that there will be another opportunity later. It's just helpful to do this in the first meeting so that there's time to extend invitations and try and schedule with those briefers to come in. So this will not be the only opportunity to provide potential invitees. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Commissioner Debbie.
Yeah, I just want to echo what Samir said about the PCCP. I think if we were going to ask somebody from their group to come, I think we need to ask somebody who has enough background and history with the policy recommendations that have been forwarded to the mayor's office about police things, because there are a lot of new members now, and there's just kind of been a lot of I don't want to use just things that are sort of churning over there, and to get somebody to come and talk to us who actually has firsthand experience with submitting policy recommendations to the city and what happened to them. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Debbie. Very good. We'll now move into discussions. This is an open discussion, and we ask you to follow our normal rules. Please be brief each time you speak, even though you can speak multiple times. Please be facilitated, and remember that the commission uses a weighted stack.
Dr. Moses?
Yes.
There's a question in the Q&A that may also be.
We're gonna get to that really awesome question in there.
Okay, great. and I wasn't sure if you saw. I wasn't sure if Jay's hand was still up.
I did not see Jay's hand, so thank you so much, Ayomide.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I know that there was a request to, I think, review the different sections. I don't know if that's something we wanted to do before the discussion, because I assume that that reviewing that would actually help with the discussion, and I support that as well. So I was wondering if we could.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is that what you were asking, Sophia? I just want to make sure that I represented your request.
Yeah, yes, sorry. I'm just stuttering. Go ahead.
That would be great. So staff, if you could help us, that would be lovely. So
I can also read it, right? So section 2/1001, which is make recommendations regarding police practices, policies, and directives to the Portland Police Bureau and with a primary focus on community concerns. And then I don't know if we wanted to have a discussion about each before we go on, or whether I should read all of them and then go into the discussion.
What do people want?
I think maybe we should just ask if there's any discussion and then move to the next one. Is that okay with everyone?
Yeah, that sounds great. If everyone else is okay with that. Okay, all right, anything to discuss about section 2, 1001? All right, then I will move to section 2, 1006. Which is the board shall have authority to exercise independent judgment in performing all legally assigned powers and duties. Any questions, comments? Oh, Commissioner Sophia.
So I'm just gonna reiterate some things that we've already said about having some legal. I think it was Christian. Was saying we should have some legal things in there. And so I just was trying to pinpoint some of these things. Someone did advise us legally. That's all. I just want to reiterate that as a point. I'm making notes, so I'm sorry. But go ahead.
Co-chair Christian?
Hi, thanks. Yeah, I just wanted to say, I think I found a little bit better language. The word parameters, I think, is good to kind of have someone with legal expertise to kind of explain what the parameters are around our ability to create policy, or not create, but to suggest practice and policy adjustments or change in the police bureau. I don't know, maybe that's a little more clear. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Commissioner Jay?
I know that this is a question for staff. I know that there was talk of like hiring somebody that was not the city attorney to advise us kind of on a regular basis, and I wasn't sure if this would be one of the instances where that person or you know, it probably, I assume that the time frame is not going to work out as far as that's concerned, but just wanted to ask just in case.
Yeah, that is sort of a slightly different question in the sense that this wouldn't be like a briefing necessarily format, but certainly someone who could come in and assist. Independent legal counsel has a couple different ways to be achieved within the city, and both require approval from the city attorney before hiring that independent legal counsel. So that's something that administratively we're pursuing on the logistical side to try and get someone who fits the needs of the commission. And once we sort of get that permission, that would be something we'd immediately be able to have that person come in and brief the, you know, answer questions, kind of look at documents if needed, all those sorts of things. In another subcommittee, when asking for this question about who should brief the commission, one of the suggestions that came up was to ask Heidi Brown, who is in the city, she's a deputy city attorney in the city attorney's office, who has briefed the commission before and was one of the reviewers of the ballot measure 26-217, the charter section we just reviewed, to come up with a list of potential attorneys. That was a commission member requested that request be given to Heidi Brown. It has been given to Heidi Brown, and she said that she's going to look at it and try and come up with some folks. We're not obligated to use those folks as independent legal counsel, but they'd be a starting point to any list. So, and of course, if any other member of the commission has particular attorneys that fit that list, then it would definitely be helpful to pass that along to staff so that we can try and get independent legal counsel as quickly as possible. Does that answer the question, Co-Chair Jay?
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you, staff.
All right. Section 2, 1007B. The board shall have the authority to make policy and directive recommendations to the Portland Police Bureau and City Council. The Portland Police Bureau shall consider and accept or reject all policy or directive recommendations made by the board. If the Portland Police Bureau rejects a policy or directive recommendation, then at the request of the board, City Council must consider and vote to accept or reject the policy recommendations received from the board. Council's decision will be binding on the Portland Police Bureau.
Any questions there? Any Commissioner Sophia? And then Debbie.
So this at the end, I guess maybe I should say the end, the middle, it says if the Portland Police Bureau rejects a policy or directive recommendation, then at the request of the board, the council must reconsider and vote and accept or reject the policy. So I know we went over some of these items, and I'm assuming that maybe that's what Debbie's gonna talk about. And one of our last subcommittee on how that might go about. I know there's been some concern with the subcommittee on research about this. So I just wanted to point that out as something that maybe we should look into more detail of what is that process exactly? And how do we manage that? So that was all I had. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Sophia. Commissioner Debbie.
So I just wanted to make note of the fact that Philip mentions the Training Advisory Council, and their job is to submit policy recommendations to the Police Bureau Training Division. And I think if we had PCCP and Training Advisory Council come to talk to us about their experience about what has happened to the policies that they've submitted, would be very, informative for us, because I mean, obviously this provision B in this in the charter amendment kind of gets at the fact that, if you can give committees all the power you want to submit recommendations, but if there's no obligation on the police bureau side to do anything with them, then it's sort of a meaningless thing. But this was added into this was part of this charter amendment to make sure that the police bureau actually has to consider the recommendations, and if nothing comes of them, then the city council makes the final call, which is a really helpful power to have. And so but I do think it might kind of help us understand how important it is to have this power, depending upon what experiences PCCP and TAC can share with us. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Anything else, Jay? Co-Chair Jay?
No, I don't have anything to add.
Okay, that sounds good. Then I think we will continue on with our conversation on how this subcommittee relates to other PAC powers and duties phase subcommittees. So how does structure relate to the other two subcommittees? Commissioner Sophia.
I would say definitely the structure helps. The structure helps. It gives us the avenue for individual police accountability. Once we have, if there's no structure to get them accountable, then how do you do that? So I think it's important that this structure is laid out to actually ensure that the other subcommittees can actually accomplish their mission. I'm not sure exactly what they're doing in the subcommittees, but I think some of that needs to be kind of thought through as well.
Great observation. Thank you so much. Commissioner Jay.
I really appreciated Commissioner Debbie's notes from that she sent out earlier, and I think a lot of the potential tasks, in my mind, they kind of make clear those. Maybe they don't explicitly make clear those connections, but for me, those connections are there. So, for example, one of the subcommittee tasks could be how to propose direct changes to police policies and directives. So, those police policies and directives are going to be affect, the individual discipline that the officers get, right? So that's one of the groups, is the officer accountability group. And then the other one is access to information, which presumably is like, how do we get the information we need to be able to do a full investigation? So I think one of the other subcommittee tasks is like how to propose policy changes to PPB, and the process for making policy and training recommendations. And I think that we can talk about policy related to maybe access to information, but not in a way that's kind of overstepping on them, and training recommendations as well in terms of like officer accountability. So yeah, I think that the tasks, a lot of them, there's definitely like intermingling between some of the other things, and that might just be sort of something we need to figure out as well, is like how do we do this without necessarily stepping on their toes, acknowledging that these things are intertwined and there is some overlap, but also like we have our specific scope that we really need to stay to.
And this,
ramblings.
yeah, thank you so much, Commissioner Jay, because this is where in the Q&A where Philip's question would come up. Would it be possible for the board to have the power to attend or drop in unannounced on police trainings so they can see what is actually happening in the trainings? So very interesting suggestion, question, and that's where this would come in. So thank you, Phil. And staff, if you would like to come in to the conversation.
Yeah, sorry. So there's a whole sort of process by which recommendations are made and submitted, and then there's what happens after they're submitted and the structure for that. And so that how of all of this is sort of the task of this subcommittee to develop. And part of that would be kind of learning how the current structure yields a yes, a no, or a lack of response, which all three are possibilities that occur in the current system. And then, as Commissioner Debbie mentioned, the what happens after there is a yes, it is not necessarily implementation. There's sort of a question as to what happens after there's a commitment to make a change. And part of that how relates to the other question that is in the chat from Dan Handelman, who is a member of the commission, not a member of the subcommittee, but who asked, does the language of the charter mean that the Bureau can't accept part of a recommendation and negotiate changes with the board? It says they, quote, shall consider and accept or reject. And that's the sort of question that, with the assistance of legal counsel, I'd imagine, would be helpful to explore as a subcommittee and determine if there is a step that isn't necessarily enumerated in the charter, but could be enumerated in code, for example, that would allow for some sort of conversation that could yield a partial yes, or as well as sort of how does the initiation of this process start, which is something that is making policy and training recommendations. And does that come from the current system where there's a universal directive review and that is sort of based on when there's a request from the Police Bureau for proposals, or if there's another methodology. There are off-cycle reviews right now, but there's sort of, that's the sort of question that the two questions in the Q&A yield.
Thank you so much, staff. Commissioner Debbie.
So another thing that I thought of, I did that kind of little summary of all the things from the different documents, and that kind of overlaps between two subcommittees is this idea of under reporting, the oversight body maintains an online tracker. Whoops. Sorry, I was looking at one of my computer. Let's see, scroll, where was it? I think it was J, maybe. Oh, there it is, right there. Maintains an online tracker of commission policy recommendations, including their responses and implementation. This came from one of the cities that I looked at, which was Seattle, and they have they have different the agency makes recommendations, the oversight body makes recommendations. I think there was somebody else who makes recommendations, and they have a whole thing on their website with the policies that were recommended and what happened to them. And then they even have an analysis of why some of them were not accepted or implemented. And, sometimes it's the police union contract. Sometimes it's because some sort of enabling legislation hasn't all been put in place. I mean, there are all sorts of reasons. And so it's just really interesting to see, to really find out what happens to, these groups go to all this work to develop policy to recommend, but then what happens to it after that? And that was I thought that was a great thing.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Debbie. Anyone else? Commissioner Christian, sorry about that.
No worries. Yeah, I just wanted to, the way I think about how the subcommittees overlap is that officer accountability to me seems like it's more about, I don't want to say day-to-day, but it used to be called the individual accountability subcommittee. So I kind of see it as like individual officers being held accountable on like a day-to-day. I guess I'm going to use the word day-to-day, but that's not the appropriate way to say it. I just can't think of another way to do it. But basically day-to-day violations or larger violations that happen in a specific day. Whereas structural oversight to me feels more like the overarching one. And obviously those two interact with each other in big ways, but one of them is more micro and one of them is more macro. That's how I viewed it in my head. And then access to accountability is sort of that in between that gives the future board the tools that it would need to implement one or the other. I'm assuming probably closely related to officer accountability, but still affected by structural oversight. Just kind of like big picture, smaller picture, and how the two relate to each other. Yeah, I'll stop there. Thanks.
That's so helpful. Thank you so much. Yes, staff.
I could actually defer to Co-Chair Jay first.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yes, please.
Yeah, I guess I just had a question, and this might be something that maybe we might need legal assistance for, but maybe staff knows the answer. But I was thinking about how I was reading about how the internal complaints within PPB have increased over the years. Dozens every single year, 70, 80, whatever, or something. And in a number of those, they reported retaliation. And so I'm wondering where retaliation, like where that would be addressed. I'm assuming in structural oversight, but I'm not really 100% sure. I feel like that's a very important issue that should be addressed somehow. And I'm not really sure how we can address that huge problem within, PPB's culture.
Thank you so much, Commissioner. Staff?
Yeah, so first, a direct response to that question as best I can. And then there was another point I was going to make as well. To the question Co-Chair Jay just raised, it kind of depends to what degree retaliation is something that independently constitutes misconduct, and which itself would initiate a administrative accountability investigation and potential response on the sort of individual case side. And this is referring to what Commission Co-Chair Christian just said in terms of the micro macro. The individual case of it would be something that would be addressed as part of, you know, the list of types of misconduct that would go through an administrative accountability investigation. The culture side is definitely something, and we're going to talk about this in the next discussion question because it comes up in some of the fact-finding phase documents. Culture is definitely something that the subcommittee would talk about in structural oversight. So certainly a culture that yields retaliation would be something that would be addressed by the proposals by the oversight board in a manner that aligns with the proposals this subcommittee would make. And then the other point to make is just to try and avoid duplication. This is on a separate subject, to try and avoid duplication between the work of this subcommittee and the access to information one. All of the work that the oversight board will need to do will require some level of access to information. And so there's sort of an assumption built in to the way that these subcommittees are structured that the access to information recommendations will ensure enough information to do the policy work, to do the structural oversight work, and all of that. So just wanting to acknowledge that to avoid duplication of efforts there.
Thank you for that clarity. Really appreciate it. I suggest that we take a break. Let's take 10 minutes and come back at 8:03. Yes, yes. And thank you. And we'll be back in 10 minutes. I'd like now to move on to the second question that we want to tackle in a discussion format. I'm going to share my screen. And that is, what sections of existing PAC documents are relevant to this process? So that's what our conversation, our discussion is going to be about in this next few minutes. Who would like to start us off? Staff.
Yeah, just wanted to probably share the screen when Commissioner Debbie had sent this document, and it's pretty similar, but I can wait until her time to speak, but I think we independently prepared a list if it's helpful to talk about and all of that, but happy to share either version of that, whatever's most helpful to members of the subcommittee. I can just show the full document and then kind of walk through what everyone said. So
that sounds great. Thank you.
Yeah, leading off with the barriers, and before anything else, does it make sense to kind of pause item by item on this one, or does it make more sense? I'm seeing nods.
Yes.
Okay, so just gonna quickly share the screen here. Apologies for this, trying to make it so that it is zoomed in enough for accessibility reasons is why the window is kind of awkward shaped at first every time there's a screen share. Apologies there. So this is the document that the PAC adopted as part of the fact-finding phase. It is essentially the problem statement of the commission. It is the barriers to police accountability and best practices in the current system. The items that were flagged in Commissioner Debbie's document was essentially the outcomes section, which is one of the best practices that the current system can make policy recommendations. So this is this document was both the barriers and the best practices. So in the last section in the best practices section was that the current system can make policy recommendations. There are also several items under the barriers side, which staff flagged as possible things that relate to this. So starting with under accessibility and equity, There is, under the burdensome parts of the accountability system disproportionately impact community members who are part of historically excluded groups. The entire section here, the policies that create the standards police are held onto, were determined by the PAC in the fact-finding phase to be too low. And then in the culture section, this document reads that culture and history structurally fail to address or even take seriously the impacts of policing on historically excluded groups or the disproportionate level of effort it takes for those community members to participate. So that's both things that relate to this. Under current laws and policies, there is a section, all of it indirectly, of item 9. The current system is governed and protected by several layers of local, state, and federal law and policy. Indirectly in the sense that the new oversight system's ability to get involved in bargaining and legislation is a component of structural oversight to address some of those things, and certainly directly through the 3rd section policy, that the complaints that might be of community concern, some of them may not be considered be able to succeed as an individual misconduct complaint because the standards do not. There's no rule against that sort of conduct. It is not necessarily considered misconduct. So that's the policy section down here. Under effectiveness, actually, maybe it doesn't make sense to pause. We said we'd pause after each, and I did 2 at once. So I'll pause here after number 9, and then I can circle back to number 7 before proceeding on.
That sounds good. Commissioner Jay.
Yeah, so in regards to the last thing that you were just reading, about how the standards are really lenient, and so sometimes pretty bad behavior is not, it's not, it's under their it's currently under like their standards, so it's like not a problem. So how would we be able to do something that is like if we were to say that this is a standard that police have to abide by, like, wouldn't the collective bargaining unit just immediately strike that down because it contradicts their standards? Like, do you see what I'm asking? I guess I'm just curious how we can implement higher standards without collective bargaining completely, throwing that possibility out.
So not all standards of police conduct are defined in the collective bargaining agreement with the PPA. Some are referenced in there, and others are the ultimate sort of authority on that may also be city charter, city code, or more likely police directives. So directly, the portion of policy that would relate to this would be exactly what the subcommittee is figuring out, how to make a policy or directive change that would define a type of conduct as misconduct or not, would be included in that. And then indirectly would be the collective bargaining component that currently does not have public representation in it. And we'll get to talking about other jurisdictions in a moment. That's not the case everywhere. So that's something that would fit into structural oversight as well, is who's in the room for collective bargaining in the future. And as your point is, of course, reflected in the law section as well, certainly. But there's, I think beyond that, it would probably be a council. Not council CIL, council SEL, independent legal counsel question. Yeah.
That's helpful, staff. Thank you so much. Anyone else have questions? Commissioner Debbie.
I wonder if it'd be helpful, and maybe this isn't the right moment, but to go, I made that little handout. It's like 2.5 pages to just walk our way through that, because I kind of picked out all the things I thought, I think it'd be good for other people to take a look, that I thought applied to our scope of responsibility.
Yeah, that is where we're at currently on, we just went over there was one item that your document, Commissioner Debbie, flagged for under the best practices, which was the outcomes section at the bottom. I think we did that right when we got back, so I'm not sure. But it was this last section here.
Right.
The very last sentence. And then there wasn't anything flagged on the barrier side, so that's sort of I'll be super clear so that it's clear that the items in the barrier side is things that staff flagged. Our lists are 100% identical. I can tell you for the subject matter experts in the other jurisdictions documents, Commissioner Debbie. So happy to go through each item as you flagged it for those, if that's helpful.
Yeah, I mean, it's up to others. I just was thinking, it's just on the thing I do is short. It's kind of got all the things picked out, and it also has the pick. I copied out the kind of what our job is supposed to be. Just thought it might help kind of ground us if we looked at that. But again, it's up to others.
Commissioner Debbie, I think we're going to get there. Commissioner Sophia.
Great, thank you.
I'm sorry, I was going to say that let's continue where we were. I know, Debbie, you came back a little late with the overview, and then we can come back and reiterate some of the things that you've already put on there. How's that sound to the group? Okay, thanks, guys. So staff, can you continue, please?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, first thing was the best practice that outcomes that the current system can make policy recommendations. The second item was number 7 here, and again, outcomes was flagged by Commissioner Debbie. Everything else in this first of 3 documents is things that staff is flagging as the sort of all of these are essentially problems of structural problems that structural oversight could address. And then we were on to number 9, which very directly on the policy side and indirectly on collective bargaining and law would also be problems that the commission has identified, barriers that the commission has previously identified, which structural oversight would be addressing theoretically. Anything else on this one before moving on to the next item? So then number 11 under effectiveness, item 11, while the first part deals with things that the officer accountability subcommittee would be talking about, the second section of limitations of discipline refers to discipline's limitation in that it does not make systemic changes. So that is considered a barrier, that the discipline system of the discipline portion of the current system is not doing the structural larger systemic changes. And that would be a barrier that structural oversight processes recommended by the subcommittee could theoretically address. Any questions on this one? Okay, next up would be under culture. Under number 16, specifically the bargaining portion of it that relates to, I think, what Commissioner Jay, Co-Chair Jay said just a little while ago. The current barrier that collective bargaining favors the interests of these 2 particular collective bargaining units. And then there's some broader items here with relation to like the cultural norms that also might relate indirectly. Any questions or comments on this part? Okay, and then with relation to number 19, so this is under the section called inadequate resources for community oversight. Specifically, the lack of response and implementation is considered a barrier. So this has to do with something Commissioner Debbie addressed verbally a little while ago with recommendations are often not responded to. And the first and the section above and below this are more related to individual officer accountability actions, but the middle part here is more policy side. Any comments on this part? Okay, and then I wasn't certain as to what degree that the way that number 20 is written, which again is under inadequate resources for civilian oversight, is very broad in this section. And it relates to in administrative accountability in the particular, but it may be that the commission feels that this is at least indirectly referring to the part of the process defined in the charter whereby council would adjudicate if the oversight board makes a policy recommendation that the police chief and bureau do not want to implement. So just flagging that one as well. And that's everything for this document. Any comments on this last one? Facilitators, please feel free.
Sorry about that. I was on mute. Commissioner Jay.
This isn't on this last one. I was actually mulling over one of the previous ones that was talking about the culture and how yeah, like I'm not sure exactly what the expectation is around what we're supposed to offer. Like it's just really hard for me to understand like how we would have the power to change the culture and not have the like union intervene, because I mean, just from my experience in the tech world, which I know is very different from government, where hiring and firing people is not as to, you know, a billionaire's whimsy or whatever. But like in the tech world, the understanding was like, if there was a cultural problem, you get rid of the people that are the main part of that problem. And then you do basically almost like reprogramming of everybody else to get them like on board. And it's hard for me to imagine that being possible. And like I guess I'm curious, like if there's an example of how, like what we could offer in terms of culture change, like what we could possibly recommend is around policy that's not hiring or firing people and not, you know, reprogramming.
Thank you, Commissioner Jay. Commissioner Sophia.
I just wanted to kind of add to that, and just to express that I understand Co-Chair Jay about the cultural change, and that is a difficult one to institute, but it's also something that you can't change the current culture as it is. It's like not like you could just flip it around, right? You can't just go, okay, you guys are out and you guys are in. It's going to be a process, and it's going to be something that has to be I call it folded in, like we're baking. You fold it in with some of the policies and some of the practices. And, you know, some in the individual oversight subcommittee, that's something that they can have in theirs as well. It's just going to be bits and pieces. It's going to take a while. And my thought is if we can get a little bit of something somewhere, hopefully, you know, it can build in the other areas as well. So I know what you mean, the culture, it really bothers me. And it's not something easily changed. So I'm just agreeing with you. Sorry, didn't mean to stutter around, but thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Sophia. So I wanted, okay, staff, go right ahead.
Yeah, just to quickly answer the sort of process question from Co-Chair Jay about other examples. The next documents we're getting into include the other jurisdictions document, which does have examples of other jurisdictions that may be helpful to look at. This document is simply a problem statement. It doesn't necessarily mean that the commission can address all of these. It's simply a required task under one of the tasks that was required of the commission under the last phase of work from resolution 37548 was to identify barriers in the current system. And the commission chose to identify both barriers and best practices in a single document. So that's what this document was, and just highlighting the ones that relate to structural oversight. It doesn't necessarily mean that all of those can be answered. Some of those can be, maybe not all. That's up to the commission, how they want to recommend to city council. And then in terms of other examples, we're one or two documents away from that, and Commissioner Debbie highlighted a lot of examples in the other jurisdictions document, which may relate to what you're asking about.
So I was going to suggest that we go on to the next document, and that it may be Debbie's document. I just want to, if Debbie has done all the work of pulling it all together, is it okay if we go into there? I'm asking Commissioner Sophia. I want to just double check with you if that's all right. Okay, I say a yes. All right. So staff, if you would like to lead us through what Debbie has done, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, I actually think Commissioner Debbie, if you feel comfortable, I'm happy to help, but if you'd like to lead through this, I'm happy to scroll around wherever you'd like.
Sure. Really, again, this is just kind of copied and pasted from, from all the stuff that we have. So I think it would be maybe good to go back up to our job at the top. Because and I know you've kind of gone over this, but this is short and sweet. And so, and probably missing some things, but so the things that we have from various places is how to propose direct changes to police policies and directives, how to propose policy changes to PPB, process for making policy and training recommendations from community board and agency staff, chief and police commissioner's obligation to respond and follow oversight board's decisions and recommendations, police recommendation development, delivery, follow through, etc., and processes, hiring, firing authority for PPB officials, budgetary oversight for PPB, inclusion in collective bargaining processes, and more. And possibly, I think, Samir, you may have come up with some more things and everything that you showed us, but maybe we can add to that so we have it all. And then I went through and picked out, the headings on each of the things that we pulled out. And is this the jurisdictions document where?
Yes.
Back up. Yeah. Okay. Good. I'm sorry, I can't see the headline. Okay. So in section A, there were some things that were related on policy. Obviously, that this one's called policy. So A1, the oversight body is empowered to take input from community members on broad policing policy issues. And remember, these are examples from other jurisdictions that we're taking inspiration from. The oversight body can assess implications of alleged misconduct cases they review, including on policy, procedure, and training, and take action after this assessment. A3, the oversight body has authority to make recommendations regarding policy and training with the potential to improve police department operations. A4, the oversight body sets policy for the police department. A5, the oversight body has a staff unit focused on policy. I just, as a side note, when I read that one, I thought, no, that's an interesting idea. I know IPR had an analyst for quite a while, and they may still, I don't know, but back when they had a work group that looked on auditing closed cases, the analyst was really helpful in working with that group on thinking about how to look at things that have been in the past, how to learn from them and make policy recommendations. So it's kind of nice to have even a half a staff person, whatever it takes to actually work on something like that. And then A6, the oversight body conducts a public review of the police department budget. Okay, and then the next section is, well, maybe to do any, maybe people, Dr. Moses, do you want to, I don't know, you want to find out if people want to say anything about any of those?
Yeah, I don't think that we're gonna have really enough time to go through the entire document this evening. Like we're going through line by line. I don't know when this document was sent, so I don't know if people have had a chance to review it.
You know, I sent it out yesterday, but then this afternoon, right before the meeting, I added these few things that are yellow. Yeah,
Okay.
everything else was from a day ago. Yeah.
Okay. And scroll through, staff, if you don't mind.
Sure, yeah, it's just, that's everything that hasn't been read, but is in the other jurisdictions document is currently showing on the screen.
Okay, great. Yes, so I would say let's go for another 5 to 7 minutes in this document. Please ask questions as they come up or make suggestions, and then we'll move on into next steps, because what we're going to want to do is to assign work groups or research, or how are you going to tackle this information? Yeah. Oh, yeah. So go ahead, continue, pretty please.
Okay, sorry, there's things in front of my, okay, oversight body and jurisdictions, there it is, okay. B1, the oversight agency fulfills an investigatory and disciplinary function, an auditing and monitoring function, and a review function to ensure both individual and systemic police oversight, including overall agency practices and policies. And then I, audit functions. The oversight agency audits closed cases alleging misconduct and may recommend policy changes. And that's something that we have the ability to do right now in Portland. The oversight body may conduct sentinel event reviews and or reviews of undesirable police related activities. Maybe there was more to that sense, but it was to learn, you know, from those unfortunate events. Reporting, the oversight body maintains an online tracker, we talked about this earlier, of commission policy recommendations, including their responses and implementation. Oversight agency community engagement. The oversight body engages with the community on how to improve police practices and policy. Collective bargaining, the oversight agency has representation in the room during collective bargaining. And continuous improvement, the oversight body is required to self-evaluate and recommend changes to its structure on an ongoing basis and through regularly scheduled self-evaluations. And Portland had that one in 2008, I think is sort of similar to what this is talking about, the Eileen Luna Firebar report. And I think, is that the end, Samir?
That is the end of the
Okay.
other jurisdictions document.
Okay.
If I can, yeah, just mention two things. One, the staff unit focus on policy. Staff is sort of a weird situation because it's defined as part of the next phase of work, but also policy review is defined as this phase. So just wanted to flag that might be something to consider. And that was the only thing that varied, I believe, between the list of things that we flagged and the list of things that you flagged, Commissioner Debbie. There was one thing which is worth mentioning, and this actually relates to a question that Co-Chair Jay had earlier, and it is F3, and it relates to an ongoing discussion that is at the full commission level about whether or not the charter would need to be amended. It would need to be, but whether or not the commission would like to pursue the ability to be involved in the hiring and firing of the police chief, which certainly does relate to the culture of the institution in the way that Co-Chair Jay brought up. We've got some legal guidance on that, and this will be a topic of conversation for next Thursday at the full commission level. But just wanted to mention that's the only other thing that didn't that wasn't mentioned. Would it be helpful to move on to the subject matter experts document? There's, I think, only 3 items in here.
That's great.
Yeah, just these 3 right here.
Okay, subject matter expert structure. The oversight body should have the ability to proactively provide structural oversight, not solely react to misconduct by individual officers. And then I didn't do this on any of the other ones, but the thing about policy is in this little explanation. NAPOL's examples of proactivity include independent analysis of police data related to use of force, stop and frisk, or other procedures, financial auditing and recommendations, review of policies, independent investigations, and proposals to address systemic issues. And then A3, the oversight body should be the final decision-making authority on disciplinary matters, adjudicating use of force, recruiting practices, and policy development. Continual improvement. The oversight system should be able to be improved by city council or independently over time.
Beautiful. Any questions? And do we want to go to the next? Oh, staff, yes.
That is the last document. There were 3. So I
Okay.
just wanted to quickly flag that's the same list that the staff flagged from this document. And just mentioning a little bit of additional context on item E here. The ability for right now, the oversight board doesn't exist. So the Police Accountability Commission is developing code recommendations and can propose charter recommendations too that relate to section 210 or other sort of oversight focused language in each of those documents. And the or independently component of this would be a thing that would need to be proactively given in the code to the police oversight board to allow it to originate those sorts of recommended changes to charter or code. Because right now it doesn't currently have that authority because it doesn't exist. So yeah.
Thank you so much, staff. So any questions or thoughts what we've been over? We can have a
I have
discussion on this. Yes.
I thought, so I might be kind of jumping ahead, thinking about tasks, and I'm trying to think about like ways to like divide up, just thinking about this and the B part where it says like oversight body and jurisdiction talks about investigatory and disciplinary function and auditing and monitoring function and a review function. And those seem to be, in my mind, like good places to start as far as like dividing up how we think about these things. And then also maybe also dividing it up in terms of like what like each of us potentially doing research on like agency practices versus policies in those specific realms. But also I'm not sure if I know that the research phase already happened and I don't know like how far, I don't know if we're really going to be going deep into research. So I guess I'm curious about what other people are thinking as far as tasks and next steps, but also that's the next section. So if someone else has something to say about this section, feel free to jump in beforehand. Commissioner
Debbie.
Yeah, so I don't have the answer. I'm just, again, thinking out loud. So I think you're right. We already did the research is supposedly done. We've got all these documents of all this stuff. And, but right now we're supposed to come up with the powers and duties. So we don't have to work out the mechanics yet, if I think I'm right, but we have to think about what do we want our oversight board to do in this area that we've been assigned. So then maybe it's up to each of us then to take a piece and look through these things again and think, do we want our oversight agency to be able to recommend policy changes? And then it seems to me maybe we could kind of put a little bit more detail on that, just to be, you know, not, that's just too small. We want to get into some more depth on that. So I don't know, that's just my initial thoughts, that maybe the research is already there. We just have to go back and look at these documents with it. Because the things I listed are just the bold statement at the top. You know, if you look under them, there's examples that we can be, you know, that can give us some ideas of how to kind of beef these things up a little bit. So, yeah, sorry, probably not helpful, just thinking out loud.
It's super helpful. Thank you so much, Commissioner Debbie. And I just wanted to also say thank you so much for the hard work of going in and distilling all of this information into this document. So I want to give you big kudos for that. Thank you for the time and effort.
You're welcome.
Any other strategies for tackling this work? Commissioner Sophia.
So I was just looking at the one document for the subcommittee, and, you know, going back to what co-chair AJ said, drafting groups was mentioned in there. And, you know, I don't know exactly what the groups would be right now, but I could see there being, you know, different topics that we do and come back with a draft. Right now, I think if there's some ideas that staff had already had for these groups, I'd like to hear them. So I don't want to fumble over it right now. And if it's something that we want, something else we want to do or we want to add, we can do that. I'm still, my mind is still taking all the pieces and trying to put them together right now. So I'm just gonna leave it open if there's someone else who has ideas to go forth, and please present them. But right now I'm thinking of drafting groups, but I just don't know what they would be at this point.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Sophia. Staff?
Yeah, basically the way that Commissioner Debbie looked through the fact-finding phase documents and pulled out things, I looked through what Commissioner Debbie had highlighted and pulled out things and kind of synthesized down and had essentially 10 sort of potential places to look at things, some of which are included in the enumerated tasks of from the council or the charter, and some of which come out of the fact-finding phase documents. So there's the process by which policy recommendations are created by the oversight board, the process once the recommendation is made, so how it goes between the Bureau of the City Council, and that relates to the Q&A earlier from Commissioner Dan about the partial implementation possibility would be included in that. The ability of misconduct cases to yield policy or training recommendations, which would also relate to the auditing of closed cases to find potential places to look. I should mention the process once the recommendation is made also includes the obligation to respond component. Collective bargaining. The relationship with the current PPB directive review process. They have a process whereby they have a cycle of reviews on a regular basis, and whether or not this integrates, exists completely separate, subsumes, replaces, whatever, would be a part of that conversation. The continual improvement conversation, which is to say the ability to originate charter or code recommendations, ability to influence state and federal law, budget review, and Sentinel event reviews. So that's actually, I think, 9 things. I'm counting again. Yeah. So put those in the chat here. And they are not numbered, so they're a little bit unwieldy in there. Apologies for that. And you know, they could theoretically be, narrowed down further in some way if or consolidated further, but these seemed like separate enough concepts to be kind of sort of worth a separate look. I put numbers on it and reposted it, so it's a little bit easier to read, hopefully. Yeah. Does that answer your question, Commissioner Sophia?
So helpful.
Yes, thank you. It has been helpful. I need to mull over this more, but yeah, it kind of gives me a outline. I don't know what the rest of the group thinks, but just like to hear.
How would this group like to tackle this list? Commissioner Jay.
I feel like these fall under like specific categories. I mentioned B before, the highlighted thing, and so one of the things is a review function. So there's a few different things that are reviews, and so I wonder about like grouping it by sort of type of thing in terms of like dividing out work. I know that we don't have a lot of time, so I don't know if we necessarily have the time right now to determine what would fall under a category, but yeah, I'm curious if people look at this and think that any of these fall into like neat categories, and if what those categories might be.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Sophia.
I wasn't actually thinking of categories. I was looking at this list and thinking about who said what in the meeting. And so I was kind of focusing that way when I was thinking of, the collective bargaining, policy recommendations out of misconduct cases and auditing. I was thinking about you, AJ, because you had mentioned those too. You talked about misconduct cases in the auditing internal. So my mind was thinking, that might be something, if we wanted to just split up. And I know for me, I'm just thinking about my areas, my policy recommendation development, the process that's made to the city bureau. I think somebody else had mentioned that, what is that process? I don't know if it was you, Debbie. That's number 2. I don't know if you mentioned that. My mind was like splitting up things based on some of the comments that we made. And I was thinking, I don't know, Christian, are you really in or you're not? I don't know. What I know you're talking about federal and state laws, and you're talking about the law. We didn't really talk about budget reviews and Sentinel event reviews, but we did talk about, policy analysts. So anyway, that's my thought process. I was just kind of looking through and seeing who mentioned what. And thought maybe if it was something we wanted to just pick and choose each person, something that was of interest, and start from there.
Great question. Thank you so much. Commissioner Christian.
Hi, yeah, it's a bit hard for me to contribute to this because I'm not on the subcommittee, so I don't think I'll be here on future meetings. So I don't want to overstep because I won't be able to commit too much time to it. Anytime to it, I'm on a different committee. But I was curious, there's a fourth person, I forget who all is in, there's a fourth person on this subcommittee besides, because I know there's only 3 here right now today. Faith, is that the other one? Okay, cool. Or Commissioner Aiken. I'm trying to get better at using the commissioner terms. Commissioner Aiken is the other person. I think from what co-chair Jay said and from what Commissioner Glenn said, It kind of sounds like there are categories, because what you're talking about with people, what people have mentioned and what they're interested in, those you can kind of still group those in certain places. So I do see, like, I see policy, I see review, and then I see a third one that I can't quite pinpoint, maybe relationships, because of collective bargaining. I don't really know, or ability to influence federal state law, maybe more like legal relationship to larger law. I don't know, but I see those two for sure. Review and policy I see, and then I think there's like a third miscellaneous category that I can't quite pin down. I don't know if we want to try doing 4 categories since there's 4 people, or if 3 makes sense and then one of them can be split up into 2 places. Yeah, those are my thoughts.
Thank you so much. Staff?
Yeah, just mentioning that Commissioner, it is Commissioner Faith, and also she had mentioned that it's comfortable having a task sent her way. So if I don't know, it kind of sets up well for even though one of them is a little bit bigger than the others. So quite a bit bigger actually, but there's yeah, that's a possibility as well.
So if there was, okay, I'm going to go ahead and go to Commissioner J as I formulate my thought. Pretty
Yeah, I
plain.
mean, we're probably trying to formulate the same thought. Yeah, so I mean, there was a recommendation that we like just pick, which I am totally down to do. And I think that, I mean, Commissioner Sophia, you're pretty much right on in terms of like what I wanted to do anyways. So I mean, we could just do that. And maybe, I mean, maybe I wonder if should we divide up the 9 into 3, and then, I mean, public reporting, staff put in the comments that that could be for the next phase of work, but you know, maybe we could give that to Faith just in case, you know, like, and so yeah, it's something that she can work on, but also if not, it's, you know, something that we'll use for the next phase of work, you know.
I think that's great. And staff has outlined some categories, A, B, C, and D, and taken the list and put them together. So if people would like to volunteer for a particular category, that would be wonderful. Commissioner Debbie.
So I'd be happy to take that first category, but I don't want to take it away from anybody who really is even more excited about it than I am. So I'm happy to stand back if somebody else super enthused and take a different one, but I'd be good with that one.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Debbie.
I mean, I'll take B.
Very good.
You're muted, Commissioner Glenn, if you're trying to speak.
I will take D, 6 and 7, continue improvement, and ability to influence federal and state law. Not that that's my specialty, but I will take it. Yeah, I'm more of a policy person, so I'll take that for now. We can always add, you know, as we move on.
That is wonderful. Thank you so much, Commissioner J.
The policy one is so large. I mean, I wonder if we could have like 2 people on that and then maybe just combine like 4 and 8, and I can do that. And then could have Commissioner Faith do 6 and 7. What do folks think about that? I mean,
Commissioner Christian. And then,
So,
go ahead.
oh, it's okay. I was going to talk about something else, but I do agree with that idea. I think that works. I actually had that thought when the list first came up, because the first category is so big, it does seem like it wouldn't make sense to have 2 people on it. I'll say my next thing next if someone else wants to respond to that first.
Well, I just want to make sure that when we're talking about handling these sections, that you're developing ideas which can be later converted into text and assembled into a first draft of areas of agreement on structural oversight. That's what the task is. And so just making sure that there's clarity there for you. Staff?
Yeah, just to add to that, the next meeting of the subcommittee is 2 weeks from today, the 15th. So we'd probably over email ask for each individual member to send in some text that can be, circulated in advance of the next meeting and likely collated into a single document. So you're probably looking at 10-ish days to kind of look at this and develop it. So what I'm seeing is that that Commissioner Sophia had volunteered for the continual improvement, ability to originate charter code recommendations, and ability to influence federal state law. And that we had Commissioner Jay volunteer to do collective bargaining originally. And that we had Commissioner Debbie volunteer to do policy recommendation development, obligation to respond and process once a recommendation is made, and taking policy recommendations out of misconduct cases and auditing. And by taking out of, that doesn't mean removing, that means initiating it from that point of that place. That's a word choice issue there, as well as Sentinel event reviews. And then that would have left Commissioner Faith to the budget review. It may be possible to combine those in the way that Commissioner and Co-Chair Jay mentioned in terms of assigning a second person to assist Commissioner Debbie with that. Can you clarify, Commissioner Jay, were you offering to do that yourself, or were you volunteering Commissioner Faith for that? Essentially, was the question I had.
Well, Commissioner Sophia said that policy is her wheelhouse, her area of expertise. And so I just figured it would probably be most comfortable for her to be in her area of expertise, which was the category A. That's why I offered. If that's not something you don't want, then feel free to completely disregard. I just wanted to offer that because you mentioned specifically that was your area of expertise.
So can I scramble things a little bit? I'd like to scramble things just a little bit, just because I just want to see how everybody else thinks about it. It may not be quite as neat, but I think it might work a little better. Co-Chair Jay, this is my thought, because those were your areas as 3 and 4. And I don't know if you still want to do that. It's partly what you were doing as we volunteer for 4, and it's also a little bit of the policy, but it sounds like we can split that up a little bit if that's okay with folks. I can still keep the other part that I volunteered for, which is what was
6
it?
and 7.
7. Yeah, I can still do that. So we're left with what was 8? C was 8, Sentinel reviews. That seems like a policy thing to me, but anyway, doesn't matter. And then we can keep Debbie. I don't know if you're still good with 1 and 2 and 5.
1, 2, 5, and 9.
I don't know if you were good with that, or, I'm just trying to get everybody doing something that they're interested in. That's all.
I saw her nodding.
Oh, sorry, I'm so busy trying to read the stuff in the chat. My brain is half there and half listening to you. Okay, so I'm good with 1, 2, 5, and 9. Is that what you, and I'm happy again. If we think 3 minutes from now that you want to reconfigure, I'm good with whatever. but I'm writing down, yeah, this.
Yeah, I mean, I just want everybody to be able to do something that piques their interest.
Absolutely.
You just get better product that way. And then, you know, we can always add to each other's as we go along if we come up with something. It's not like we're stuck in these and we can't add. It's a group effort. So that's just my thought process.
Thank you so much. So I want to applaud you for the hard work that you have done this evening to being able to identify the areas that you want to research and then be able to bring back information on. I also want to move us into the next point, that the full commission approves members to serve as subcommittee co-chairs. This subcommittee does not currently have a subcommittee co-chairs. Full commission co-chair AJ, who is a member of the subcommittee, and Christian, who is helping out, are providing support. However, the full PAC does need to approve co-chairs, and that this is on the agenda for the December 8th public meeting of the full PAC. Can we potentially have co-chairs this evening?
Sorry to interrupt. That has to be under the bylaws, that's a full commission decision. So
Right.
it has to wait till next Thursday. Sorry, just,
Nominees, I guess.
yeah, so the email went out asking for folks to volunteer. So if anyone would like to be a candidate for it, you just can respond to that email, and then everybody will be circulated early next week, so that going into the meeting of the full commission on December 8th, everyone is aware of who the possible co-chairs are and can hopefully come to a decision during the December 8th meeting.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Okay, and so then our next our next thing we need to tackle is open public comment on the issues the PAC is discussing, or community members can also tell their story about policing and police accountability. We will ask members of the public to keep their comments or questions to 2 minutes at length, and to raise their hand in Zoom if you would like to speak. So I would like to move into the public comment at this time. I see that 2 people have been promoted. I'm going to ask Dan to go, Commissioner Dan Handelman to go first, and then Philip. Commissioner.
Hello, everybody. This is Dan Handelman. I use he, him pronouns. I am a commissioner, and also I'm with the group Portland Cop Watch. And I put a couple of things in the Q&A that one of them made it to the chat, but just in case you didn't see them, the Police Association was given in the last bargaining session with the city the authority to review the final draft of all policies, which we objected to at Cop Watch because we think they should be able to comment along with everybody else, but it implies that they have more power to influence those policies than the public does. So that was a good question that came up about that. And my understanding is they can bargain on any of these policies if they think it affects their workplace safety, et cetera. I kind of thought that you were going to go to the jurisdiction document and go through the individual other cities and what they do, but I guess that's what you're going to do when you break into your work groups of one. And on that note, I don't see any reason why you shouldn't be able to work together if you want to, because your quorum is 3. And like in the subcommittee that I'm co-chair of on officer accountability, Officer Renault, who's not a member of that, offered to help with things, and I want to extend that offer. If any of you want to, ask me for help with drafting, I'm happy to help with that. Oh yeah, the thing about reporting, I think there's no problem, I would suggest that with writing up a suggestion about how the reporting gets done about the policy recommendations in this phase and then just kicking that to the next phase. It'll make it easier as part of the reporting recommendations by the commission. So those are my thoughts for today. Thank you for all your hard work, and see you at the next full meeting.
Thank you so much, Mr. Dan. Philip?
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes,
Yeah.
My name's Philip Chachka. I use he, him pronouns. I'm also a member of Portland Cop Watch. Thank you for your work. One thing I think you should consider with structural oversight, things like structural racial discrimination would be an issue that your group could consider. When you're talking about disciplining individual officers, it's not like it'd be very difficult to discipline an officer for, they pull over more Black people than white people or something like that. But as a structural oversight, you can look at the overall PPB and what they're doing. For instance, Portland, pulls over. If you're Black in Portland, you're 3 times more likely to be pulled over than a white person. You're twice as likely to be searched, yet half as likely to have contraband than a white Portlander. So I think your group can consider how you can look at issues like that as a board, how the board can look at issues like that, and how they can either, I don't know if it would be appropriate to enact discipline on the whole PPB, but to think about how can we, I don't know, maybe it is okay to enact discipline on an agency. I'll leave it with that.
Thank you so much, Philip. Are there any other people who would like to give public comment? Seeing none, I'll move on to the garden plot recap. This is time for facilitators, co-chairs, and staff to summarize any items already brought up today, which didn't fit into today's agenda. We'll recap those here and use them in developing future agendas. We won't be using this time to add new items not previously mentioned or to discuss any items, but we will use this list to develop future agendas so these items can be addressed. Amide, do you have any garden plot?
Yes, I do, but I'd like to first direct it to staff to see what he has written and to see if they match, because sometimes they do.
Yeah, the only thing is probably what you had, but it relates to the Q&A comment that Commissioner Dan just mentioned in the public comment, and getting legal counsel on that and kind of legal counsel in general, which is not exactly a garden plot item because it's more of a logistical thing, but certainly the part that relates to the Q&A is.
Yep, that's kind of what I have. And then yeah, the legal advice, and then just the briefers in general, which I think that's just going into the overall notes for the meeting. And maybe the possibility of getting a PAC analysis or analyst, excuse me, as one of the other things that I had on here.
Thank you so much, Ayamide.
Yeah.
And since we do not have co-chairs for this committee, but we will be going on to our last slides. So the Police Accountability Commission now accepts advanced public comment in 3 ways. The online web form, voicemail, and postal mail are all ways of connecting with the commission here. Public comment received by Tuesday at 8 a.m. is circulated in advance of the Thursday PAC meetings. Public comment received by Friday at 8 a.m. is circulated in advance of the Monday's PAC meetings. And so I would like to thank all of you who attended today's meeting and for your contributions today. Thank you also to our interpreters supporting access to meetings, the Police Accountability Commission and its subcommittees for all Portlanders. Finally, thank you to the members of the community for attending and contributing your thoughts and questions. The next meeting of this subcommittee is on December 15th. It is now 9:06 and this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.